Welcome to the deep dive.
You ever feel like you're watching some kind of global drama play out, like almost too strange to be true?
Oh, absolutely. And that's what we're diving into today. We've gathered a whole stack of material, different reports, articles, you name it.
Yeah, trying to cut through the noise,
Yeah.
see what's actually connecting these big events and big personalities.
Exactly. We're looking at, well, a major tech figure everyone knows, a certain former U.S. president who's definitely still in the spotlight.
Hard to miss them.
Right. And then this political movement gaining steam over in the UK.
So our goal here is really to unpack how these things intersect, the clashes, maybe the surprising links, all based on what these sources are telling us.
Let's get into it.
Okay, first up, the sources really zoom in on this flashpoint around, what was it, June 14th, 2025.
Yeah, that's the date they flag.
Yeah.
And it's this really public, very messy feud that just blew up online between Elon Musk and Donald Trump.
Messy is putting it mildly. I mean, the material lays out some seriously heavy allegations being chucked back and forth. Unproven ones, it stresses. Totally unproven. Like, Musk putting out there this claim involving Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. The sources are clear. Zero evidence presented for that.
Right. And Trump fires back instantly, doesn't he? Accusing Musk of being a drug addict.
Again, same deal, according to the material, just an accusation thrown out there, no proof attached. It paints this picture of, like, the Wild West on social media.
Anything goes, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
But why does this particular spat even matter? It's more than just two famous guys who don't like each other, right?
Oh, way more. The sources suggest this reflects these much deeper currents in American politics. It's about power, who controls the narrative.
And control of the platforms themselves, like X, which Musk obviously owns.
Exactly. It's framed as this battle for dominance in a world that's already, super polarized. Almost more grouping than fiction because it's real.
Two massive egos, huge platforms just colliding.
And one source even used this interesting analogy, comparing them to figures from the Mahabharata.
Oh, really? How so?
Seeing them not as straightforward heroes or villains, but more like these complex, morally gray anti-heroes. Fighting it out, not really over deep ideology, but more for public attention, for influence. A power struggle wrapped up in tweets and memes, basically.
That definitely sets a dramatic tone for everything else.
It does. So you've got that simmering in the U.S., but then the focus shifts, takes us over to the UK.
Right, because the UK political scene, specifically the Reform Party under Nigel Farage, kind of enters the fray here.
And this is where you start seeing these pretty striking parallels emerge. Reform's platform, as the sources describe it, well, it hits a lot of those populist notes we hear globally.
Like what specifically?
Strong anti-immigrant rhetoric, big promises on tax cuts, especially for the wealthy, and these sort of broad claims about fixing everything without getting bogged down in the details.
Sounds familiar. Part of that wider trend, as the material suggests.
Exactly. And they highlight one specific appointment Reform made, a guy named Zia Yusuf.
Yusuf. He's described as this multi-millionaire banker turned, like, concierge-type mogul.
That's the one. And his job for Reform, pretty blunt. / local council budgets.
And not just any budgets, right? Specifically targeting what the sources call woke programs.
Yeah, things like diversity and inclusion initiatives are explicitly mentioned as targets.
Okay, hold on. This is where that connection you mentioned comes in, isn't it?
Bingo. The sources draw a direct line, a really clear parallel, between what Yusuf is tasked with in the UK, cutting these DEI-focused budgets, and Elon Musk's big push in the US.
You mean his Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE.
That's the one. Both aim squarely at DEI and similar initiatives. It's presented as a transatlantic push on the same front.
But it's not just presented as a goal. The sources immediately raise flags, potential downsides, especially for the UK councils.
Right. They point out that slashing budgets like that isn't simple. It could mean job losses for civil servants, scrapping important programs, maybe alienating a lot of people.
And aren't a lot of UK councils already in pretty dire financial straits?
That's exactly the point the material makes. It questions the wisdom of trying to fix an already leaky ship, so to speak, by punching more holes in it with these cuts. Does the fix actually make things worse?
Which leads us right into this whole messy debate around diversity, equity, and inclusion DEI. It's a hot topic in both places, according to this information.
Definitely a flashpoint. And just to be clear, we're talking about policies designed to make things fairer, address bias in workplaces, and systems for people from all backgrounds.
But the criticism has been loud, especially in the U.S., from figures like Musk and Trump, The sources mention their claims.
Yeah, calling it a woke conspiracy, blaming it for, well, seemingly everything. Trump even made that wild, completely baseless claim about DEI causing a plane crash.
Which the material explicitly calls out as having no factual basis.
Yeah,
But it shows the temperature of the rhetoric.
absolutely. And over in the UK, Reform's angle, as described, is framing these DEI programs as giving unfair advantages to minority groups at the expense of, quote, regular people.
The sources label that kind of framing as a dog whistle, right? Language with a hidden, potentially prejudiced meaning for a specific audience.
Precisely. And the counter-argument presented is that DEI's actual aim is to level the playing field, to tackle real existing biases and create fairer opportunities.
The sources do seem to acknowledge that these programs aren't always perfect. I mean, what policy is.
Sure, but the critique is that scrapping them entirely is like, well, the analogy used is throwing away your GPS just because it took you down a wrong turn once. You lose the whole navigation system.
And there's almost a sarcastic edge in the sources when they talk about the implied alternative from the anti-DEI side.
Yeah, the idea of just hiring only one type of person, it's highlighted to show what they see as the absurdity of arguing against inclusivity itself.
So much of this drama, these arguments, they play out very publicly. Which brings us to the stage itself, social media, and specifically Musk's platform X.
Oh, X is absolutely pivotal in all this. The material positions Musk not just as a participant, but almost like the stage manager or maybe the director deciding what gets the spotlight.
His tweets seem to have this outsized impact. Things he posts about, say, a supposed UK civil war or grooming gangs, they ripple globally.
And the sources argue potentially stir up a lot of division in the process. They point to a specific example, the riots in the UK back in August 2024.
Right, the material says those were ignited by false claims spreading online. And Musk tweets that Britain is on the brink of civil war.
Which, the sources are very clear, was not actually true at the time.
But the riots did happen. Targets mentioned were mosques, places housing asylum seekers. Police got involved. Instigators like Tommy Robinson are named in the material for spreading hate.
And the key thing underscored is Musk's apparent silence afterwards. No correction, no follow-up on that inflammatory tweet, despite the real-world violence that occurred in that context.
And of course, you have Trump using X as his main channel, his megaphone, bypassing traditional media.
Absolutely. Rallying his base, pushing his narratives, the whole dynamic, the Musk-Trump feud, the surrounding controversies, it's framed as almost peak X content, a constant battle for clicks and attention.
It's where information and maybe misinformation just catches fire instantly.
Yeah, shaping public opinion in real time.
Okay, let's shift to another really sensitive area. The sources say both Musk and Reform have zeroed in on the issue of grooming gangs in the UK.
Yeah, this is described as a particularly sore spot they've focused on, and it's a genuinely serious issue. The sources acknowledge that.
They provide context, mentioning that 2022 report by Professor Alexis Ray, which had like over 20 recommendations.
Right. But the material also notes that the previous government is seen as having done very little with those recommendations. There was inaction.
So into that context steps Musk, calling for a national inquiry. But the crucial part, according to the sources, is how he frames it.
Exactly. He's framing it predominantly, it seems, as a Muslim problem. And that specific framing gets picked up and amplified by Reform, and the sources say some figures in the Conservative Party, too.
This is where that phrase selective outrage comes up again in the material.
Yes. The sources push back hard against the idea that this is exclusively tied to one community. They argue that grooming gangs involve perpetrators from various backgrounds, and focusing solely on Muslims doesn't solve the problem.
Worse, it fuels division, Islamophobia.
That's the argument presented. And to underline this point about selective outrage, they pose a question. Where's the same level of sustained fury and calls for inquiries from Musk and these groups about, say, the children being killed in Gaza?
A stark contrast.
It just hasn't generated that same kind of relentless focus on his platform or from those political groups. It makes you question the motivation behind the intense focus on one issue with one particular framing.
There's even that slightly sarcastic suggestion in the sources.
Oh, yeah, that maybe Musk should launch a DOGE inquiry into, all crime everywhere if the concern was truly universal and not targeted.
Looking back over all these different threads, the feuds, the politics, the specific issues, there's a theme the sources keep returning to: hypocrisy.
It really does seem to run through a lot of this. You've got, as the material points out, Elon Musk, himself an immigrant, often criticizing asylum seekers and Muslims.
Then there's Donald Trump, His slogan is America First, but the sources note he's quick to engage with foreign figures when it suits his personal agenda.
And reform in the UK, promising better public services, policing, healthcare, while pushing for tax cuts that would mostly help the rich. Cuts that would likely mean less funding for those very services.
It's like saying one thing and proposing the opposite.
Yeah, and they contrast Musk's stated goal for DOGE saving money with Trump's track record, where deficits often grew according to the sources, and reforms council cuts, seen as potentially adding more debt for local authorities.
So it's this pattern of actions seemingly clashing with the stated principles or goals.
That's the picture painted across the board.
Okay, so we've navigated this pretty tangled web. The fights, the politics, the social media storms, the specific controversies, the apparent hypocrisies. Listeners might be thinking, all right, interesting soap opera, but why does this global spectacle really matter to me?
And that is the absolute key question, because whether you're in the US, the UK, or anywhere else connected by these platforms, these battles aren't just abstract dramas. They have real consequences.
In the US, they're shaping debates about how government money is spent, the future of social safety nets.
And in the UK, it's directly feeding into policies on immigration, taxes, the funding and shape of public services that people rely on every day.
And social media isn't just where it happens. The sources show it as the main arena. It's where these ideas get amplified, distorted, and fought over, directly influencing public mood and political decisions.
So the big takeaway, the lesson drawn straight from this material is stay informed, definitely. But you absolutely have to question what you're seeing and hearing, especially from the loudest voices, the ones with the biggest megaphones.
Because the sheer noise, the drama itself, can be a huge distraction from what's actually at stake.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
This whole thing, it really does feel like some sprawling, ongoing saga. It's definitely not finished.
No, it feels like we're mid-season, maybe. And the final thought this deep dive leaves us with, kind of building on all that, is don't just sit back and watch this show.
What do you mean?
The sources really push back against passive consumption. They encourage you, the listener, to actually dig into the substance of these issues being fought over DEI, immigration, government spending, whatever it is. Don't just react to the headline.
Right, beyond the tweet, basically.
Exactly. Seek out the original reports. Actually try to read Professor Alexis Ray's report on grooming gangs. Don't just rely on someone's biased summary of it.
When you see those huge, dramatic claims, civil war, scandal, just pause.
Take a breath. Ask, where's the actual evidence? Show me the proof. Don't just accept the assertion.
The sources even end with a few slightly cheeky suggestions.
Yeah, like maybe sending Elon Musk a history book, noting Trump might be, busy on the golf course.
And framing reform as promising the moon while planning to slash the budget for telescopes.
It's a memorable way to put it. But the underlying message is serious. Stay sharp, stay critical, stay curious. Don't let the spectacle obscure the reality. Keep diving deeper yourself.